On April 12, 1861, Confederate artillery opened fire on Fort Sumter in South Carolina, igniting a brutal four-year conflict that would test the very survival of the American experiment and claim hundreds of thousands of lives across the continent. The war was fundamentally rooted in the existential crisis of slavery, as Southern states sought to preserve an economic system built on human bondage, directly challenging the Northern Republican platform that aimed to contain and eventually dismantle this institution. The conflict pitted the United States, or the Union, against the breakaway Confederate States of America, led by Jefferson Davis, who sought to establish a sovereign nation built explicitly upon the legal and social framework of racial inequality. Geographically, the war unfolded across two primary theaters, the Eastern Theater in Virginia and Maryland, and the Western Theater, which spanned the critical Mississippi River Valley, where control of the waterway was essential for splitting the Confederacy. The spark for this total war was the 1860 election of Abraham Lincoln, which prompted South Carolina to issue an ordinance of secession, triggering a chain reaction that saw 10 other Southern states follow suit by early 1861. Early military engagements, such as the First Battle of Bull Run in July 1861, shattered illusions of a short, bloodless conflict, forcing both sides to mobilize massive industrial and agricultural resources for a protracted struggle. The strategic momentum shifted decisively in the Western Theater during 1863, when Union forces secured control of the Mississippi River, effectively bisecting the Confederacy and cutting off vital supply lines from Texas and Arkansas. Technological innovation defined the war, as the introduction of rifled muskets, ironclad warships like the USS Monitor, and extensive telegraph networks transformed traditional military tactics into a precursor of modern, industrialized warfare. The Battle of Gettysburg, fought from July 1 to 3, 1863, stands as the war's high-water mark, where Union forces repelled General Robert E. Lee's second invasion of the North, inflicting heavy casualties that the South could never replace. Beyond the battlefield, the war exacted a devastating toll on civilians, with Southern infrastructure decimated by blockade and bombardment, while the Northern economy accelerated, driven by wartime industrial demand and the rapid expansion of rail networks. Despite fears of intervention, European powers like Great Britain and France remained officially neutral, though they closely monitored the conflict's impact on global cotton supplies and the shifting diplomatic landscape of the Atlantic world. Following the stalemate of 1864, the war entered its endgame as General Ulysses S. Grant launched a relentless campaign of attrition in Virginia, while William T. Sherman executed his destructive march to the sea through Georgia. The conflict reached its conclusion on April 9, 1865, when General Robert E. Lee formally surrendered his Army of Northern Virginia to Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse, effectively signaling the collapse of the Confederate government. The human cost was staggering, with total casualties estimated between 620,000 and 750,000 deaths, leaving a nation scarred by the loss of an entire generation and the physical destruction of vast swathes of the American South. The war fundamentally altered the American power balance, shifting authority from the states toward a centralized federal government, while simultaneously setting the stage for the 13th Amendment, which constitutionally abolished slavery across the entire United States. The legacy of this crucible remains deeply embedded in the American consciousness, defining the ongoing struggle for civil rights, the interpretation of constitutional law, and the persistent tension between federal mandates and individual state sovereignty. Today, the Civil War serves as a foundational case study in the fragility of democracy, reminding us that the preservation of a unified nation often requires the painful, necessary confrontation with the systemic injustices that threaten its core values. Lincoln's preliminary Emancipation Proclamation of 1862 was a calculated strategic measure, designed to weaken the Confederate labor force while simultaneously preventing foreign recognition of the South by framing the war as a moral crusade against the institution of slavery. The Gettysburg Address, delivered in November 1863, redefined the war's purpose, articulating a vision of a nation dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal, thereby transforming the conflict into a struggle for a new birth of freedom. The fall of Vicksburg on July 4, 1863, occurring simultaneously with the victory at Gettysburg, demonstrated the effectiveness of the Union's Anaconda Plan, which sought to strangle the Southern economy through naval blockades and control of the Mississippi River. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln on April 14, 1865, just days after the surrender at Appomattox, robbed the nation of its wartime leader during the critical transition to Reconstruction, leaving a complex, unfinished legacy that continues to shape contemporary political discourse. Ultimately, the Civil War remains the defining crucible of American identity, proving that a nation divided by the moral stain of slavery could only survive through the total transformation of its legal, social, and political foundations.